Hello friend, most of my stories are heard, not subscribed to the channel. To that, be kind, subscribe at once, and also note the reminder so that you don't miss a new story. Your support is more valuable to me. Good health to you. Have a good day. And now, a new story.
It wasn't that Madeline didn't like her stepfather. She just didn't accept him. Well, he's not her father, right? Madeline never had a father, and Robert wasn't her father either. But for her mother's sake, she tried to avoid showing her displeasure in any way from the first days she met him. She wasn't a little girl. She was already 10. She understood that her mother wanted a family. She wanted to be cherished, to be loved. Robert wasn't bad, but he was very silent. But he was just a stranger. It's like he didn't even notice that Madeline lived there too. But he didn't drink any alcohol, unlike Lily's father. Lily was not only her best friend, but also her cousin. Robert ignored the fact that the woman he loved was raising a daughter. He simply accepted her existence as a fact and began to make plans for the future, hoping that his new wife Grace will bear him his own son, or even two. I married quickly and quietly, sold 2 small apartments and bought a large one where Madeline had her own room. And her stepfather and Madeline established a neutral, tolerant relationship with each other. After lunch, after school, Madeline went to her room and tried to have less contact with her mother's husband. She never tried to become friends, either. When Grace felt nausea in the morning and began to feel dizzy, all of them were happy. She must be pregnant. Madeline dreamed of a baby brother and Robert dreamed of a son. But the worst thing happened. It was not a new life, but a tumor forming in the young woman's brain. Balin became an orphan at the age of 12. She had only one way to go. To an orphanage. She had not yet had time to think about her future, as she was completely crushed by the grief. But suddenly she overheard the conversation between the mother of her friend Lily, Grace's cousin, and Robert. It was as if she was making excuses to Robert. "I'd adopt her. I understand that Grace was my cousin and we're not strangers. But I can't even cope with my own life. At least once a week Lily and I have to escape from home when my husband gets drunk. I just can't. We don't have any other relatives." Malin didn't want to eavesdrop, but it happened. And from that conversation, she understood that the social workers had come, that they were going to take her to an orphanage, and that the only reason she was still in that big, spacious apartment was that her stepfather had begged the social workers to let Madeline stay at home for a few more days in hopes of finding Grace's relatives. "Madeline, we need to talk." Her stepfather tried to start a conversation, but was silent, figuring out what to say. "No need to explain it to me, I already know I have to go to the orphanage." "No, that's not what I was going to talk about. If you don't mind, I want to apply for guardianship. After all, your mother and I were officially married. I say we can try, but only if you want to. I know I'm not a good father, but I can't let you go to an orphanage. I can't. Shall we try? For Grace's sake, let's try. She's probably watching us from heaven right now and she's worried." Madeline had no idea that a grown man can cry. Especially Robert. "I didn't even cry at the funeral. He just stood there with a stone face. Not a single tear shed. And now he gave vent to his emotions." Madeline came over, put her arms around him, and comforted him like a child. Everything worked out for them. It wasn't easy, but Robert took custody of the girl and life moved on. It's hard to say who was more supportive, Robert or Madeline. A time heals. As they settled the household, learned to cook, to talk to each other. Though Robert was too silent, Madeline got used to it a long time ago. Besides gratitude, she began to feel respect for her stepfather. He was a fair man. He stood up for her at school more than once and tried to cheer her up with the little things. He would buy her ice cream after work or buy her and her friend Lily 2 tickets to a movie premiere. Aunt Margaret visited them from time to time to help with household chores, give them some advice and sort out the bills. Lily often came to visit Madeline and stayed the night. The pain gradually faded. Life was returning to normal. Robert fulfilled his father's duties, went to school, left part of his salary at home for general use, and never asked for reports of money spent. Madeline tried not to let him down or upset him, but she never called him daddy, either in person or behind his back, understanding that she was a stranger to him. When she turned 14, Robert decided to have a serious conversation with her again. At this time, he asked her opinion about his marriage. He got into a relationship with a coworker, and it turned out they were expecting a baby. I would go to live with her, but you can't stay alone yet. Moving in together to her place is not an option either. Would be a bit cramped. She only has a room in the company apartment. But what if she moves in here? Do you think we'll get along? Everything seemed to be working out fine. Her stepfather's new wife, Bethany, looked around the home with an important look. It was your first pregnancy. Robert cheered up and Madeline tried to smooth out any conflicts that occurred. For some reason, she never had a difficult teenage phase. She must have grown up immediately when her mother passed away. Bethany, on the other hand, was acting strangely. Madeline thought it was all her pregnancy and didn't tell Robert how the smile slid off his wife's face when Robert left. Bethany was showing Madeline that she was the boss now and Madeline was nothing. And now this stranger's child, by misunderstanding, by Robert's stupidity, interferes with their lives. Realizing that Madeline was not going to tell Robert anything, Bethany began to openly insult Madeline. She was annoyed by someone else's daughter. Someone else's child. Once again, the old tactic helped. Keep out of sight. Robert was unaware of what was going on for a long time. But when his and Bethany's son Eric was born, Robert began to suspect that it wasn't easy for Madeline to live with them. Bethany had already begun to hint to Robert that a stranger's child was getting in their way a lot. So what? Even if part of this apartment belongs to her, we can pay off her share when she becomes an adult and let her live her own life away from us. Right now the government should be taking care of her, not you and me. She's a total stranger to us, she told him. Robert had absolutely no ability to argue. He really had been taciturn since he was young, and arguing with Bethany was simply impossible. But he pulled himself together and said sternly, "Stop it. I don't ever want to hear that kind of nonsense again." After that, he asked Madeline to visit her mother at the cemetery. They cleaned it up, painted the fence, and replanted the flowers. They sat in silence and it was as if they had become close again. As in the first 6 months that had been filled with grief and pain. "Don't worry, Madeline. Everything will get better. Please be patient. Soon Eric will go to kindergarten, Bethany will go back to work, and she won't have time for foolishness and scandal." But Bethany began to act differently. She took all financial matters into her own hands. Madeline no longer had access to general money. She had to ask Bethany for money for even the bare necessities, even personal hygiene products. Madeline never complained to Robert. She didn't want to be the cause of their quarrels. She was so glad that her stepfather was tearful, that he was happy again. She could see how much he loved his son. One day, Robert happened to know that Madeline didn't go to lunch at school. She was already in 9th grade, often stayed for extra classes, and went to basketball in the evening. It turned out she was always hungry until the evening. She never had any pocket money for a meal either. They used to have a cash box for general use, but now all the money was only in Bethany's card. Robert was called into the school and Madeline's class teacher told him off. "Robert, please talk to Madeline. I understand that it's fashionable to be skinny now, but she's too skinny. Like she's sick. Like she's sick. Soon she'll be fainting from hunger, and who should be responsible for that? School again. We're sick and tired of their diets. When Robert finally realized that he had completely forgotten about pocket money for the girl, relying on his wife, he berated himself and scolded Madeline for keeping quiet. "Daughter, forgive me. I'm a slowpoke. But why didn't you tell me right away? Remember, you have your own bank account. That's where I send all the custody benefits and the payments that the state provides for you, all in your personal account. Let's not spend that money yet. You've got college and a wedding ahead of you. I'll just give you your own back card so you can use it for your own expenses, okay?" Madeline barely listened to him. She didn't hear anything about the money or the card. All she could hear in her head was the word daughter. Could it be that she really wasn't a stranger to him? That he was really worried about her like she was really his daughter? He was worried not about Bethany, not about Eric, but about her. Bethany was very angry when she realized why there was less money on her card. She began demanding that Madeline's custody benefits go into the general budget so she could spend them, and she loudly lamented that she was running out of money fast. She told sadly that she was saving as much as she could, but that she still couldn't save enough for a vacation. And how could they, if they had to feed that girl? Buy her some clothes? And now Robert is giving her money? A couple more years flew by in such a disagreement. Bethany tried to hurt Madeline, but Robert always stood up for her. Madeline suffered, knowing that she was the cause of the quarrels in the family. One thing that warmed their hearts was that she and her friend Lily dreamed of graduating from high school, finding a job and renting a room together. Lily's father was constantly drunk, going on week-long binges, selling things from the house to buy alcohol. It was hard to say whose life was worse. Lily's with her biological father, or Madeline's with her stepfather. But the dream was not destined to come true. Willie had married right after graduation, almost to the first man she met. She couldn't live with her parents anymore. Balin's plans had changed too, as she wanted to enroll in a college though it provided dormitory. Robert did not support the idea, but he understood that it was difficult for Madeline to live with them. Robert had even considered buying Madeline an apartment on credit, but Bethany resisted as best she could, insisting that they should just pay Madeline the money for her share of the apartment and say goodbye to her forever. A solution came unexpectedly. Robert had inherited a nice apartment in the neighboring city. There was also an economics university where Madeline secretly dreamed to enroll, but thought that she would not be able to pay the tuition. And there were no scholarships for the desired course, and there were no dormitories available. Robert registered his apartment in Madeline's name and entrusted her with the management of the bank account, where they accumulated enough money to pay for all the years of her studies at once. He drove her himself to the neighboring city to help her move into her new apartment and to help her apply to university. Well, he really wanted to help her. But there was another reason why he wanted to escape from home for a while. Ethne was making a scene like never before. She'd been so mad when she found out that Robert had officially registered his apartment as Madeline's. Robert was already tired of scolding and hysterics, so a week off from his wife was a good thing. Robert even went to meet the neighbors in the building. There weren't many apartments there. It was a small 3-story house and a cozy apartment complex. He has to look out for Madeline and help her. Surprisingly, it was Robert. Robert, who only went to self-service stores so he didn't have to talk to shop assistants. Robert, who was always silent. For his daughter, who is ready to go over himself. "You're lucky to have such a wonderful father, girl," the neighbors said as they met Madeline in the neighborhood. "Yes, my daddy is the best," Madeline agreed. There are heartwarming moments at every wedding when it's hard to hold back the tears. At Madeline's wedding, that moment was the father-daughter dance. Robert made all the guests nervous that day. The bride did not want to go to the marriage registration until her father arrived. But his car broke down on the highway between the cities. It overheated because of the hot weather. He was driving a new car, which was supposed to be a wedding gift. The car was just out of the dealership and was not yet ready for such a long trip. But he still managed to be in time for the wedding. That taciturn man managed to do everything in his life.